So we are on to Table 3, which is industry, and I think we've combined that with some herb school stuff and different things. We're going to be hearing from Jeannie Dunn, David Doty, Ed Smith, or Sarah Katz. Hopefully we'll see who's on the call right now. Lonnie, Paul Strauss, Equinox Botanicals. I know we have here Joe Hollis again and Ed Fletcher. So Table 3, industry, ready to go. Robert, how would you like to proceed with your first presenter?
I think the people like Jeannie Dunn and myself, like Joe Hollis, we make medicine, and the other person from Mountain Rose, I think it was Dave. It's important that we understand what the big guys, why they are doing what they're doing. It seems on a small scale that we can handle it, but when we rev it up to get the big medicine, and bigger companies need 2,200 pounds a year of wild-crafted Goldenseal. That is where we need to look at the little guys to see what they're doing so that maybe the bigger guys can do the same thing.
And why do they want wild-crafted?
It seems that that's all that they go after. They say they can't get cultivated ginseng in the quantity that they want.
Do we have a Mountain Rose person on here?
Yeah.
I am on here, and I can speak to that a little bit. And so we stopped buying wild harvested material some time ago. And we're working with multiple growers, mostly in the Pacific Northwest. And they have dropped off over the years due to the pricing issue, and it just wasn't financially feasible for them. For many years, most of you may be aware of Roger Seago and a lot of the work that he did. He was one of the pioneers in this area, growing organic Goldenseal for many years, and he's pretty much out trying to sell his whole place, as a matter of fact, in his operation. And we've seen growers drop off just from a point of view that when you look at the economics of growing it on that scale under shade, and that's what we're talking about in this instance, is, you know, like ginseng, it's the same model. You're using 70% shade cloth, several acres of this material. It just doesn't pencil. It wasn't penciling at $65 a pound. Now that you start eking up into the $85 a pound range, maybe $100 a pound range, it potentially becomes a viable thing. But this is what we're talking about, is an economy of scale that works for everybody. Mountain Rose buys around, would like to buy, we haven't been able to the last couple of years, about 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of Goldenseal root, certified organic. We consider ourselves small. I consider us very small in that arena of dietary supplement manufacturers, you know, who are going to be using tens of thousands of pounds for some of their, you know, brand labels. And that's where there's this disconnect and where we have to pull these things together. And I think that multiple approaches have to be taken in order to do so. And one of the things that we've attempted to do is really look at the monitoring and the surveying of wild harvesting. And we tried to put a program together several years ago that actually had that built into a wild harvested contract. We know that if this stuff is, Goldenseal is harvested in an ethical manner, what we consider an ethical manner, and I'm, you know, avoiding the word sustainable. If it's done in an ethical manner where you're really looking at those populations over time, and when we talk about time in Goldenseal, we have to talk about 5 and 10 years, and making sure that those populations are viable throughout that time period. And so we tried to build in two things into an agreement. One of them is that it was monitored by a third party every year. And this is a wild harvested deal because that's where the material is. You know, that's the unfortunate thing. The other thing that we built in was taking 10% of that material separating out the smaller roots and replanting that stock into other areas for expansion, and then monitoring those patches over time of when they had enough grow back that they either came up to the same level that they were when they were harvested, or they were actually larger and more prolific in that area that they were harvested from. And so this was a criteria that we were building into an agreement that was to last at least 5 years. And this is just one model, and one of the things that we're really looking to do and really want to do is expand the forest farming and a certification that actually pushes this. And I really want to put a lot of pressure on those companies that are ours included, that are buying a lot, the mass quantities of this, this material. 40 tons in 2010, was a number thrown out there. I don't know what the number is now. There's not that much data, but these are huge numbers of material that's coming out for this plant that's very slow growing. And the forest farming model, or models that can be done in that way on a larger scale, need to happen. And what's happening, we have a small forest farming label that we put out, and it's got some press, but it's what I consider boutique products. We're talking about under 50 pounds of black cohosh and Goldenseal and ginseng root that were forest farmed. So it's very small quantities. Cool project, but it's not bridging this gap that we need to bridge. And this is the thing that we really need to do, is really push not only the wild harvesters, but the consolidators is what I call them. And that's where a crux point is. They're the ones that are selling to other companies that are able to sell it to the dietary supplement branding names. And there's where a control point can be, and that's where the money has to be set, and where appropriate pricing goes to the growers, the diggers, and where you can have some control. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done along there. I've talked enough on. But I'm passionate, obviously, about this crop and about this project, and I think the Forest Grown Verified thing that UPS is doing, if it can get some traction, can have an impact.
Okay. I would just like to thank you so much for coming on. It's really important to hear from our larger manufacturers, for sure. One of the things that I'm finding in North Carolina is a concept that used to be, I believe, viable, but no longer is. And that is in the forest, where we're dealing with root crops that are multi-year products. I don't think that there's anything that could be considered sustainable or resilient in that kind of a situation. I think that we in the industry need to not have any wild harvesting, in my opinion, at least in my state. And that's what we're talking about here, is North Carolina, hoping that that would be an example to other states. And so it's really interesting when I hear people say that there is sustainable harvesting of forest root crops. I just don't think that that exists anymore, because of the pressure of habitat loss and also over harvesting, but also the third element that now is coming in that wasn't there before is a huge population that now wants this product. And I really believe that the price can be adjusted for the forest farmers, and that you're right. It is the people who are gathering it all together and selling it to the larger entities that have a crush point there that needs to be addressed. And hopefully this project will address that. Thank you.
Well, in response, you may be right that it may not be happening now. That may be true, that wild harvesting is not being done ethically anywhere with this particular plant and some other ones. That's not to say that it is not necessarily possible. It may be possible. And, I think we need to explore at least that, if not at least moving in that direction. I'm a bigger advocate of farming all of this material, quite frankly, and that's what we've striven to do, and we continue to strive to do. We're continually looking for new growers. We're continually trying to put out information on stimulating the forest farming as well as under shade cloth production of this material. I totally agree. That's how you're going to take the pressure off this. But the reality of the market is not that. The reality is that there are people that have no idea that this is even an issue or a problem, that this thing is, threatened, that it's under threat. And, the project I was talking about, frankly, the reason it failed is we went in and surveyed the area and we couldn't find enough Goldenseal to make it viable. We couldn't get populations that we thought were going to be sustainably harvested, so we backed off of it and said, we can't do it in this area. And that's, a sad reality probably of a lot of areas. And so it's like, how do you bridge that gap? And that's what we're really looking to do, is find a means and a method and a price point that's going to work for everybody. And that's very difficult. And it all depends on your economy of scale is certainly a big part of it. The bigger you are, the more you can put out, the less you need to make. On the other hand, Robert, one of my concerns is if you look at ginseng as a model, the higher that price goes up for Goldenseal, the more poaching is going to happen for it in the wild. And we really have to watch that side of it too. If it becomes so valuable to people because we're paying such big prices, then we have the potential of it actually becoming more scarce because people are willing to go out there and harvest it in the wild in places they should not be.
Hey, David, is there a way, so wouldn't the way to handle this be have the consumer demand that it be cultivated material? Can't we drive this from the other end? How do we do that? And isn't that an educational component? I know UPS has tried it for years, but can't we do that bigger and stronger?
I totally agree that is one of the big drivers. And I think the other part of that, though, is also the manufacturers getting on board with that also and saying, we have an issue here and this is what we're going to do about it. We've gone for a label, and the United Plant Savers taking on Fairest Grown Verified, that project may be the way. Yes, you have to educate the consumer. We're trying to educate the consumer with this Forest Grown Verified material that we're dealing with only buying certified organic Goldenseal. We're really attempting to do that at Mountain Rose, and but it needs to be simple enough and understood. And Jeanine, you've been around for a while. I started, at Trout Lake Farm in the organic scene, and at the time before National Organic Program came in, it was a mess out there on organic certification. Everybody had their own standards, all this, different stuff, and it just got messy, and the consumer was confused. Is it, no chemicals, no spray? Is it certified organic? Is it organic without certification? Blah, blah. And this is one of the things that we need to do, is make a very clean idea of what we're talking about and what we're doing. And there's a couple models out there, Rainforest Alliance, the Wild Harvest, Forest Wild, or Fair Wild is also pushing a wild harvest or a wild crafted thing. And these organizations have an idea, but they don't interact well with each other like back in the day. Again, the example of the organic certification bodies used to be before NOP. And the message has to be simple. The reality of what that message is has to be simple and very clear, and say, and the price point has to be a point, because I don't care who you are, you go in, that organic banana is $7, the other one's, 50 cents. sorry, but I really am in support of organic, but that's too big of a bite right there, and I'm going to buy the 50-cent banana. And so that's the thing is that it still has to, we have to pull it together where that sweet spot is. We have to find that sweet spot.
Yeah. We need more companies like Mountain Rose, though, Jeanine, supporting and promoting organic and maybe forest grown verified. So we need more companies like that that will promote the product.
Agreed.
Does Lonnie want to
Who's
come?
up, Robert?
Yeah, hi. I can't talk to being a large company, but we are a very small company growing. We've started with established populations and then doing a lot of wild simulated and shade house grown Goldenseal, and we do outsource some from a few other growers and local wild stewards that we know. When we have outsourced for organically cultivated Goldenseal, it used to be at a price point that we could afford, but currently with the price point at like $2.60 a pound, that's not something we could afford. So if we do grow, I just want to say that we absolutely could support, working with other growers doing wild simulated and woods cultivated organically. And I think that we can incentivize that by giving them a higher price per pound, getting directly to the grower. And it does take, industry saying, oh, we're not going to buy Goldenseal at a lower price, at a higher price for wild, but we're going to buy the cultivated Goldenseal at a higher price, and just really incentivizing more people to be growing this crop. And then also the larger companies, maybe providing the upfront costs because it is such a large cost getting into growing, finding that planting stock, finding that seed. But so more direct company to grower, like small scale contracts.
Thank you.
Anything to say?
Well, where I have grown up here in Meigs County, Ohio, these herbs have always been harvested, and they were always looked at to supplement the farmer's income. And there are very few of them who really know how to harvest without depleting the population. I'm lucky enough to know a couple of them who live on family farms, and their grandfathers taught them how to harvest small amounts and propagate it, and they've done this for years. That's very rare.
Thank you. Thank you. And Jeannie Dunn is the last person that she's still with us.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Robert. We currently, at Red Moon Herbs, we use a little bit of Goldenseal for a private label where we make an extract for a topical product for someone in the local community. And I have one source or two that I really trust to be stewards of Goldenseal root. So I go to them and look to them. I've found a few things that I refuse to add it as a double extraction Goldenseal tincture to our product line until I can get more wild simulated or organically cultivated. But I do want to put it out there that it's real easy to cut the rhizomes up and make multiple plants, and then patience is the factor. And then the other thing, let's start using the leaf. So when I do introduce double extraction of Goldenseal, it's going to be leaf and root together.
Thank you. Thank you.
Since I'm the last person listed on the panelist, I just want to say that Goldenseal is near and dear to me too. I've been working with commercial cultivation since 1994. My first job with Wilcox Natural Products was to get Goldenseal cultivation started. So we started working with growers then. I'm still working with many of the same growers. We also funded some of Jeanine's research because at that time we were sexually propagating, vegetatively propagating. It was costly, as we've talked about. So Jeanine worked with us to help us get some of the nuances in the seed production up. But I mean, these growers have worked long and hard to efficientize the proper seed techniques to handle and cultivate the golden seal. And just like David said, the price points, they've just not been there. I mean, 95% of the golden seal that we cultivate right now is shipped internationally. We sell between 2,000 to 4,000 kgs every year, but it's shipped internationally because the majority of the companies in the U.S., Joe, they don't want to pay the higher price for what it takes to cultivate golden seal. It is higher. They would rather pay the cheaper price for wildcrafted. So again, that goes back to educating the customers, the consumers, and the companies to realize that, for cultivated golden seal, you're going to have to pay a better price. Personally, I would like to see golden seal be sold not only, but more mainly to direct to consumers or in the specialty stores. I think when it goes into the mass markets and you're just trying to get it in a bottle, and a lot of the people that go in there to buy them and use golden seal, they don't really know how to use it. To me, it's almost a waste of it going into some of those markets where it's not an educated consumer. So, I mean, there's a lot of different approaches we need to do to golden seal. It can be cultivated, like Paul said. It's fairly easy in the right conditions and handled the right way. It just takes a lot of time to learn it. And also, like David said, a lot of these growers are timing out and they're dropping off because the price point is just not there. So, and to get a new grower educated and interested in up and growing golden seal, such as the forest farming, it's an expensive startup project. So it can be done. I think we just need to support anyway, field cultivation, forest farming, growing it in your backyard any way we can. And one way of doing that is educating the consumer. So glad to be a part.
Thank you. Did we get Patricia to come on?
Yes,
Lisa?
I have her there. And Patricia, I'd like to ask your question.
So yeah, thank you for this discussion. I think I just had a few questions that I sort of stuck in there as folks were talking. One was maybe they were all addressed or mentioned. One had to do with whether or not cooperatives might be a way to go to help spread the cost and the pain and the backup, so that if someone's crop is, if part of a crop isn't doing so well, maybe another part of the crop will be in a single year. I also thought that this might be a species might be a good candidate for a Fair Wild certification, which they're in the process of doing pilot studies around the world, and I'd love to see one happen in the U.S. And that's based on the international sustainable, the standards for sustainable collection, which a lot of the folks on this phone call actually helped give some input to as well several years ago. I think those were all my questions. Thanks.
I've worked with cooperatives before with other species, and they can be great, and they can, definitely be a benefit. Unfortunately, my experience with them mostly is that they infight and fall apart often. And, that's sorry, but that's just been my experience as a buyer that's has attempted to work with multiple. I've also worked with some very successful ones internationally. And so I agree. I think it's a great idea. Cooperation with things like dryers and equipment and supplies and germplasm are all really great things. And yes, we're in support of it. I would work with any cooperative. And as far as the Fair Wild, thing is concerned, yes, this could be a herb that would fit into their model. The difficulty is, I also think it's important that we really cross this one over into a forest farming model, into a cultivated model as well. And that's what Fair Wild, they don't unfortunately transition that well. And so again, you're doing this piecing together of several different standards, and why I really want to advocate for these methods of maintaining sustainable supply of material and really trying to benefit and be ethical about the raw material supply side. We need to come together and make, potentially an international standard that everybody can comply with. And I want to throw one thing out that Ed mentioned. I agree with you, Ed. I don't know why golden seal is the thing when berberin is one of those things that's in multiple species, and berberis species, and Oregon grape, and coptis. And granted, it has a very high level. It's a great herb, but when it comes to a bottle of something that is supposed to help you with your cold or your flu symptom, or you want berberine content, great, do something that's a little more sustainable. I totally agree. This plant is fragile and, a little more wily than most that, like Oregon grape, it's a bomb, man. I mean, that's easy to propagate and produce. So I support the idea of close down the states, make it threatened, and push these guys into buying other herbs. In the meantime, Ed and I will see if we can cultivate it and get forest-grown farmers to do it up in a cultivated manner and buy it from all you guys that are doing that. So thank you for doing that, and we want to support you.
Okay.
Yeah. So Patricia, co-ops, obviously, like David said, they work great. And that's the growers I've worked with in Wisconsin and Canada also. I mean, at one time we had 16 growers in one co-op in Wisconsin. And it was because everybody couldn't afford a digger, everybody couldn't afford a dryer, and nobody did the big tractors. So co-ops work great, and these guys really work good together. So if you can make that work, and the reason it worked is each one grew a small plot, but my orders had to value up to 2,000 to 4,000 kgs. So I told them they needed a co-op together to meet that, and they got a better price for it. So co-ops do work, and I agree.
You talk about that in the past tense, so that co-op's not together any longer?
No, we're down to about 6 now, and that's nutrition. I mean, they've just aged out, grown out, retired, and some have passed on. So, but it is revitalating, Jeanine. So, but again, it's a price point. If the co-op's going to be sustainable, it has to be sustainable from a price point to make the people sustainable. So,
okay.
Where's Katie Comender? She's working on that, right? Is she in the next? Oh, there she is.
Hi, friends. I was just on mute because I wasn't in this panel, but that's essentially what the Appalachian Harvest Herb Hub does and is in place to do, is work with a network, not necessarily a formal cooperative, but a network of forest farmers throughout central Appalachia who are each growing and sustainably cultivating in a forest farming setting various forest botanicals, Goldenseal being one of them. And so at our facility in Duffield, Virginia, we have shared use commercial washing and drying equipment that farmers can use, so not everyone has to purchase a dryer. And then we offer aggregation and marketing services to help a network of farmers meet volume minimums from buyers. So if, let's say, I can only supply maybe 20 pounds, another farmer can supply 50 pounds, another farmer can supply 5, and another can supply 100. Together we can access markets, and everyone can kind of participate at the scale that they're able to.
Great. Thank you. In North Carolina, we should learn that lesson.
Robert, I think one of the keys to what she's saying is it's not a formal cooperative. Cooperatives have not done well in this region, and I think if we come up with slightly different models that give growers a little bit more flexibility, maybe that's the key. Well, I also like the diversity.
Yes, obviously, if we put this toolbox together, if we can find roots or seeds for these people in North Carolina, I think that we can, with our small growers, manufacturers rather, work with the small growers to give them a decent price range. That's for sure. I know that one thing that I've advocated in the past, which definitely could happen as a co-op, is more of the testing of the organicness of it, and as also how strong the berberine and hydrastis is, so that the market is such that it doesn't matter if you have a high level of berberine in your Goldenseal versus another guy. It's the exact same price. But if we create a market that has different levels for different berberine content, I think that the farmers could really get into that, because it would give them an incentive to produce a high quality organic root. And I think we can do it. It's not a question of that. And I think that those extra things that are out there that either our government or university could help out with getting some of these helpful places where you could send a Goldenseal rhizome to be tested and you get it back, and you know then what your content is, so that when you come up before the little manufacturer or even the person who's going to bundle it, you're going to say, hey, this is the reason I get a better price. I got better quality of my Goldenseal than the other guy who you're giving in the past the exact same price.
Do we know what conditions produce higher berberine content?
I would think that Paul or Ed might be able to answer that question.
Yes, there are a lot of conditions, and there are buyers that will pay for a higher level, berberine, hydrastine, and just all. And Joe, there is a lot of different techniques in both the growing and the post-harvest handling that can do it. Unfortunately, a lot of those are proprietary, but there are ways to do it. If you work directly with your suppliers and customers, they'll be able to support you by testing and analyzing your material. So,
I'd like to advocate for, Katie and her Herb Hub have done a great job and are doing a good promotion job too. And Mountain Rose jumped on that because of their support with a forest grown verified or forest grown product, which we created a product line specifically for. So we have side by side sold black cohosh and forest grown black cohosh. And granted, it's a small niche market, but it is possible people are interested in that. There are a certain group out there that recognize the importance of that idea and of those practices and want to support that. And so I totally advocate for a continuance of that and small labelers to get behind those kinds of ideas and promote that. So the more we talk about it and the more we get that word out, and this Jeanine is talking to what you're talking about, getting the consumer to even know what that means and that there's an issue here is really important. And you can get a price point, a better price point for that. We are getting a better price point for that material. It just happens to be a small thing. And I, really, because I know the larger market as well, that's why I pushed pretty hard on saying, let's pull this price point together to a place where we can really affect the larger market that is really having the impact on the status of this plant and on its threatened status. And that's where we have to make a big impact. And that's where cultivation and forest farming, I think, really fit in.
Okay, thank you so much. One of the things that we need to do is just wrap this session up. Hopefully, we're going to do more in this area down the line, and we might all come back together to do a part 2 of the forest farming, because there's so much to know and learn from each other about it. Thank you.